Okay, so now that we have imported the media that we're going to do, I have to do a strange step here because there was an order of the timeline, and actually I've already done the video before, um, but there was an order of the timeline, and if I actually put the logo in here in the order that it would occur, it would make the settings of the entire project really strange. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pick one of the video clips because they're in a higher def video clip. Apparently what happens is whatever you put into Adobe Premiere first into the timeline is what the default project becomes. So if you have like a high definition video with the right aspect ratio that you would record it in, if you put that into the timeline, perfect, because that's what you wanted. But if you put, like, for me, I have this JPEG that I'm hovering over here to the left. If I put that into the project, it's going to mess up and obscure my timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one of the videos into the timeline by clicking on it and just dragging it over here into the timeline part. And what you'll notice is two things take place. All of a sudden you have some things that you couldn't see before. I'm going to move this up here. The first thing that you couldn't see before is there's a video track, and then there's an audio track right here. And when you put media into it, the video track, this is to represent the actual video, like what you visually see. And then down here are the little sound waves that go with the video. So that's something that you couldn't see before when we didn't have anything in the timeline. The other thing then is you'll notice in the preview pane, if we actually wanted to see what was being said, I could hit play and we could listen to Mr. West. Let's see what he said here. So there he is talking about his multi-purpose room. I only did this though because I needed to actually get media into the project. I'm actually going to select the media. Notice if I click out of it, if I click back into it, I can cut it. I can right click and I can cut it from this. I can also select a couple of other things, and I'm going to have to show you this later, but scale the frame size. I'm going to right click and I'm going to cut it from the project. I don't really want that in the project yet. It's not quite ready. So I'm going to move the timeline back to the left of time, and then I'm going to continue working up here. So now that we have the media into the timeline and we have some settings here, the first thing that should go in if we're following the timeline of this back to school night video is really actually supposed to be the Legends logo. And so if I click and drag this JPEG file into the project, you'll notice that it's really big, etc., and it really doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit scale to frame size. And when I right click and hit scale to frame size, it actually forces it to fit into the project's configuration. If I wanted to edit this further, let's say I wanted to have any sort of like special effects on it or whatever, I can actually double click on it, and now it appears in what is called the clip editor. So not only does this edit video clips, this is also the place where you can edit how long it's on the screen. You can do a bunch of other stuff with it, but for now we're just going to keep it as is. So the other thing then that was the first part of the timeline was our video starts off with the Legends logo, and it starts off with audio in the background. So what I'm going to do is in the lower left-hand pane, the media project pane, is I'm going to search out the audio file that I want. It's actually called Varsity Short Intro, and that's what it is. Notice in the lower left-hand column here that it looks like waves. That's Adobe Premiere telling you that that's a sound file. Watch what happens when I click and I drag it into the timeline. It goes directly in, and if I really wanted to zoom in, I can move this guy up. If I wanted to zoom in really closely, you can actually see that it's a sound wave. And if I want to zoom in this way, that's another thing I should probably show you right now too, is how do things look on the timeline? Let's say I don't feel like I can see enough here. Let's say I needed to see the waves, the audio waves. You can adjust their height by doing this or making it narrower. But notice I'm over here clicking and making it wider. The other thing too is that I can, if I extend this, it literally extends the timeline this way. If I narrow it, it makes this go even wider. So the layout and design of this program it took me a minute to figure out like what I was looking at. And but in essence, this timeline, especially if you need to focus really closely in onto a clip, being able to navigate to where the clip is and then being able to focus in on it by using this slider is one of the most handy tools that you can do. Nonetheless, if you haven't noticed, this Legends logo doesn't match up with the same time of the audio. In fact, let me just preview the clip with you. If I up here on the right, I'm going to play the project preview. And notice that as soon as this JPEG is over on the timeline, it goes to a black screen. Well, we don't want that. So how do we get this to be long enough that it stays there? Well, Adobe Premiere is so easy. You just simply hover over until you see this little, where it turns into like an E facing that way with an arrow in the middle, like the little border line there. You click and you just drag it out and it'll match up. It'll even come to match up with the audio clip underneath it. Adobe Premiere is intuitive in that if you drag the thing over, it really confirms, oh, do you want it to go for the length of the thing underneath it? So there is some cool stuff about Adobe Premiere. So now what we've successfully done in this tutorial is we've looked at the timeline and navigated the timeline. We've also imported the first part of our video. And all right, so let me talk about then this navigation up to the upright. One of the things then is if you click that says go to the in is this point right here where you're at 0.0 time on the timeline. So if I click and I go to the in, it moved the blue line back to the in. And then when I hit play, you'll notice that it crosses like this. And you also notice that this blue timeline will go across there and that the video is going to play accordingly. Right now we have a total of 7.06 seconds of video so far. So let's watch in the preview up here what's going to happen. And I don't know if you noticed, but for some reason, Adobe Premiere automatically saves on a regular basis. That's another smart feature of Adobe Premiere, is that makes sure that as you're making progress, it saves for you. But let's watch what the video does. All right, so that's the first 7 seconds of the video for the back to school night video. So we've successfully placed that into the timeline. So then to kind of navigate here, you can you can say, I want the beginning to be right here, and you can click there. We're not going to do that because that's going to be a more handy thing when we actually start editing clips in the top left. But in either case, you have successfully, if you followed along with me, put an audio file into a timeline, put a JPEG file, an image file into a timeline, and you've extended and stretched the JPEG file to match the audio file underneath. And that's a good place to stop for our second tutorial.